So, welcome everyone to the launch of this report, Taking the Pulse of Open-Hearted Professionals. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the Darug people as the traditional custodians of the land from which I am connecting with you all this evening, and pay my respects to their elders, past and present. So this report has been prepared for the month of September 2025. And it's about exploring ancient wisdom, biological truth, and contemporary evidence. So I would like to start with the international heart in the sense of that heart that is understood across cultures. In Mandarin, Xin encompasses the integrated wisdom of a heart that pumps life through mind and body as one. And the Arabic qalb resonates with the understanding that this physical miracle, opening and closing thousands of times each day, actually mirrors the spiritual capacity to remain dynamically responsive to life's changing needs. Christianity inherited and transformed earlier Greek concepts used in specific senses with reference to nature. Cardia, from which we get the word cardiology, meant the pith of wood and the seed of plants. And cardia also had the general sense of center, the innermost part of men, animals, or plants. And Christian mystical traditions, from the Desert Fathers to medieval mystics like Meister Eckhart, emphasize the heart as the locus of divine encounter and spiritual transformation. And indeed, many indigenous cultures worldwide recognize the heart as the seat of wisdom and spiritual power. Native American traditions often speak of thinking with the heart as a form of intuitive wisdom distinct from cerebral knowledge. And Australian Aboriginal concepts of the heart as the centre of country and kinship connections demonstrate these similar patterns. But heart is also related to courage. In fact, the root of the word courage has been traced back to 1300 AD, courage, heart as the seat of emotions, hence spirit, temperament, state or frame of mind. From Old French, courage, heart, innermost feelings, temper, as of the 12th century AD, and modern French, courage from the Vulgar Latin, coraticum, which is the source of the Italian coraggio, the Spanish corage, from the Latin cor, meaning heart. So, heart as a source of strength and, paradoxically, vulnerability. But before we go any further, I'd like you just to take a moment now to feel your own heart, to feel the pulse. I'll just be quiet for a moment as you perhaps feel that pulse for yourself. And feel that rhythm that connects you to millennia of human wisdom. And this is where courage and vulnerability interdependently cohabit. I'd like to quote the words of the author C.S. Lewis, who said, to love at all is to be vulnerable. Love anything and your heart will be wrung and possibly broken. If you want to make sure of keeping it intact, you must give it to no one, not even an animal. Wrap it carefully round with hobbies and little luxuries. Avoid all entanglements. Lock it up safe in the casket or coffin of your selfishness. But in that casket, safe, dark, motionless, airless, it will change. It will not be broken. It will become unbreakable, impenetrable, irredeemable. To love is to be vulnerable. And so with that, I take us into, first of all, the biological blueprint of the heart, given that we're going to be looking at open-heartedness and how that's been understood in this survey. And so I want to introduce you to the heart's perfect design. And indeed, this next part is animated, where you can see what the heart is doing in each of us right now and has been doing since before birth. And that animation demonstrates that it's never fully open, but never fully closed. It's always in dynamic rhythm between receiving and giving. And indeed, it's a sustainable system, first through electrical conduction, the self-generating power of the sinoatrial node to the atrioventricular node is how we have electrical signals that reliably trigger when the heart muscles contract and when they relax. And then also it's a sustainable system for the four chambers that are receiving and expressing blood in balance. So we have contraction as the pump phase, systole, and the relaxation or refill phase, diastole. And then we have the four valves and the cardiac muscle cells that enable the right boundaries and the right electrical thresholds at the right times. So in this biological blueprint, the heart sustains itself first before it is able to serve the whole. And that becomes, I think, an important principle as we look at sustainability with open-heartedness. But if the heart fails, what happens without proper rhythm is we have arrhythmia, which is the heart beating too fast or slow or irregularly. And without boundaries, the valves, we have the problem of backflow and reduced effectiveness. And without self-care, that is healthy coronary circulation, we may end up with a heart attack with the actual blocking of the arteries. So I believe that the health wisdom for open-hearted professionals gives us three lessons that can be learnt from biology. That you need your own coronary circulation, that is self-nourishment. That rhythm requires rest between beats and not constant giving. And that boundaries prevent backflow. And so protection enables us to achieve service. So to the study. The evidence came from 260 participants in the survey. It began with the first stage of my research journey, in which I had 85 respondents invited to take an in-depth anonymous survey online that included short answer and multiple choice questions. And that was to identify key themes on workplace challenges, goals, aspirations, and skill development prioritization as indeed open heart professionals. And only those who wished to participate in a focus group consciously provided their contact details, acknowledging that I would know that their identities, but would keep that private. For the rest, they would remain anonymous. Then in moving to stage 2, the respondents who participated in stage 1 survey and who expressed interest in further exploration of open-heartedness were invited to participate in one of what came to be 13 small focus group discussions, in which we dug deeper into their responses and gained additional clarity on their experiences of open-heartedness. And then the final stage 3 was that the key themes that were identified in stages 1 and 2 of the process were aggregated and distributed for additional participants. In fact, I had an additional 175 participants take the online anonymous survey after this aggregation. So, what I have reported on here in this presentation this evening is premised on looking for shared values, practices, and lived experiences across numerous professional roles. However, further comparative analysis of roles across higher education, health services, legal services, religious or spiritual services, creative and performing arts, and coaching can draw attention to how open-hearted professionals may learn from and indeed exchange wisdom across these sectors. And so this will become the basis for subsequent professional sector specific reports, which I'll produce and launch in the months to come. But the one we're experiencing tonight is an overview of the 260. So who are you, these 260 participants of this study? Well, first of all, whoever participated in this study identified with this definition that I provided in the research as to a definition of open-heartedness. And I suggested that open-heartedness includes a willingness and capacity to practice empathy and emotional awareness. It includes to treat both oneself and others with respect and compassion, to being approachable towards partnerships and collaborations, and to being adaptive and open-minded. So, the first chart revealed the professional roles, and these were self-identified professional roles in various sectors. So in the higher education sector, I had 125 respondents who identified with roles within that sector. I equally had 125 who identified with some role in health or well-being, followed by 108 who identified in some shape or form with artistry, then coaching, then religious, spiritual leadership or pastoral care. Others identified particularly with not-for-profit, 12 with entrepreneurship, and you can read their legal services 7, journalism 2, emergency services 1. If you were to add those up, it would be more than 260, but that's because people could identify across various roles. So they might identify as being an artist, say an actor, but they would also be involved in higher education, perhaps as a part-time teacher, and they may also be involved in health and well-being as an advocate for actor wellness. So those were the professional roles who participated in the study. In terms of the age range, the highest collective was 28% of those who participated were in the 55 to 64 year age group, followed by 69 respondents in the 45 to 54, 51 respondents in the 65 years or over, 37 responded to being in the 35 to 44 years, 21 responded to the 25 to 34 years, and 3 responded to 18 to 24. In terms of gender identification, very strongly weighted towards women. 160 respondents identified as women, 74 respondents identified as men, 1 respondent identified as non-binary, and 25 did not identify in any particular gender. In terms of education, again, bearing in mind that if you responded to this part of the study, you might have both a bachelor's degree and a master's degree and a doctorate, but it gives you a sense of who this collection of open-hearted professionals is, with many people doing a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, doctorate, and then you can read that through high school, other graduate degrees, diplomas, and so on. And finally, before we get into some of the qualitative questions, this question was asked of the second survey. So this is why I have 175 responses for this. This was not a question with the initial survey, but we wanted to get a sense of how many people identified as being full-time workers. So we had 50% identified as that. Independent contractors, 25%, part-time, 21%, casuals, 12%, and so on. So overall, I found that I had collected here what I'm calling here a kaleidoscope for professional personal transformation as open-hearted professionals. And what I have listed here in this collection of circles are the various what I've called key challenges that emerge from the report, starting with the challenge of having empathy, but also being sustainable. So the paradox around empathy, sustainability. the gap that seemed to be there between professionals' desire to influence and the actual degree of impact they had. The tension between the resources available for open-hearted professionals and the values that were often not met by the resources they had. The patterns that emerged showing a sense of organizational resistance, the imperative to develop resilience, the fact that trauma exposure very much was an occupational reality for many of these open-hearted professionals, the phenomenon of the gender concentration, at least for this study of women to men, and the sophistication with which people look to the future and how they might develop further as professionals. So one of the first things that came out as I began asking questions was one that identified what I see as your profound strengths as open-hearted professionals. And this came out of a question I asked: what matters most to you in the work you do as an open-hearted professional? These were the top 3 priorities from the respondents, and you'll see the highest one had 140 respondents, 53% of the collective. What mattered most to them was nurturing, growth, and development of others, followed by making a positive impact in the world, then integrity and ethical values, then building connections and relationships. You can see the others there that are listed: achieving excellence in quality, creating safe and supportive environments, discovering meaning and purpose, and fostering creativity and innovation. But I like to draw attention to the highest one. So we had 53% prioritize nurturing others, 46% about seeking meaningful impacts, 33.4% prioritize integrity and ethical values, and 30.4% want to build connections and relationships. And I thought I'd share a few quotes that came from the qualitative part of this study. One person said that I'm contributing to the flourishing of individuals around me and hopefully also the world at large. And this came from an adjunct lecturer who's also a freelance creative. And an educator researcher said it was about making a difference to others, contributing through my work to a better world. So I felt I could summarize this by saying that you are the professionals that indeed our world needs most. But then we look at the current reality. In particular, I'm going to look straight away to stress and trauma and those impacts on our capacity to be open-hearted professionals. So I asked the question, how significant has stress, and I defined it here as a normal physiological and psychological response to demanding situations. So how significant has stress been in your working life? And this was the result. So only 5 respondents felt that they had no experiences of stress as defined there. But 16.5% identified with minimal stress, feeling calm and in control most of the time, normal daily pressures only, able to cope easily. However, mild stress, which is noticeable but manageable tension, some situational pressure, and coping strategies still effective, was 43%, followed by moderate stress, 41.9%, high stress, 29.6%, and severe stress, in which it's overwhelming tension and pressure, major impact on functioning, coping mechanisms inadequate, 13%, 35 respondents identified that. And you could pick multiple levels of stress in your response. So the stress distribution is concerning. Only 1.9% report no stress, while cumulatively 84.1% experience a range of mild to severe stress levels. And most significantly, again cumulatively, 42.6% are experiencing high to severe stress that significantly impacts their daily functioning. And I think this represents many open-hearted professionals in crisis, where a majority are operating under conditions that strain or overwhelm their coping mechanisms. So this isn't normal workplace stress. And I also was interested in differing responsibles to such realities. So I asked the question, what solutions have you tried so far that have not yielded significant benefits? So these were the ineffective stress strategies. The top one, perhaps not surprising, is avoidance and unhealthy coping, followed by work management strategies, and then a little way down, physical activity, body-based approaches, mindfulness and meditation. While they had practiced them, these were ones that they felt were not really effective in their circumstances. So avoidance and unhealthy coping ranked highest, 40.4%, suggesting these professionals have tried escape strategies that ultimately backfire. And interestingly, even typically recommended approaches like mindfulness, which was practiced by 18.8%, physical activity, 20%, and professional counselling appear on the doesn't work list for a significant number of these respondents. One clinical psychologist said, I have significant pressures that I welcomed, but when other life events occur, I feel frozen to be able to get it all done, exhausted. But there are also effective stress strategies shared. And so my question was, what have you tried in managing stresses that has resulted in some effectiveness? And this is interesting, quite different factors. Rest, sleep and self-care, and almost equally at the top, physical activity and exercise. Significantly, I think, followed by social support and relational connections, and work-life boundaries and career adjustments. You'll be able to read the rest there. I won't read this aloud, but they'll be in the report. But in summary, the top tier, we have the biological core for effective stress strategies. So rest and self-care, which is identified by 66%, and 64% identified physical activity. The second tier for effective stress strategies were relational and boundary engagement. And the third tier included nature, 41%, mindfulness, 41.1%, professional support, 39.2%, and indeed creative expression, 35%. So a key thing that I found very interesting when I did the second study, in which I was able to invite a lot of theological colleges, is that under could you suggest other effective stress strategies, the other comments in the survey revealed that prayer and spiritual practices were mentioned repeatedly in both lists, both the ineffective and the effective, suggesting many of these professionals draw heavily on transcendent resources that weren't included in the original survey options. So this spiritual dimension, I think, appears crucial for many, but is often overlooked in professional stress management approaches. So we now move to the other current reality, the impact of trauma. My question to those in the survey was, how significant has trauma, and I define trauma here as a profound emotional, psychological response to deeply distressing events, how significant has that been in your working life? Here, 25 respondents reported no experience of trauma. However, 27% noted minimal impact, 35.4% made reference to moderate impact, 81% moderate impact, 17% for severe impact, and indeed 3.8% extreme impact. So you can see the weightings were towards extreme, severe, and moderate, were a substantial part of trauma having impact on these professionals. So the trauma distribution is sobering. Only 9.6% report no trauma experiences, while cumulatively 90.4% of these professionals identified experiencing some level of trauma. More critically, cumulatively, 52.4% report moderate to extreme impact levels that disrupt daily functioning and require intervention. And for me, this suggests that trauma isn't a rare occurrence, but potentially a predictable consequence of working as an open-hearted professional in current systems. So chronic systemic stress eventually crosses over into traumatic territory for many professionals. I also asked how people responded to trauma. My first question was, what solutions have you tried so far that have not yielded significant benefits? And within the consideration of ineffective trauma strategies, avoidance and denial strategies, similar in a sense to the stress responses, was the top ineffective matter, followed by rumination without resolution, almost the same in percentage as avoidance and denial. Then inadequate self-awareness and self-care, self-medication and unhealthy coping, inadequate professional care support, and ineffective community awareness or support, and lack of boundaries. So avoidance and denial, unlike where where avoidance was problematic with trauma, it became the top failed strategy. Rumination without resolution, this uniquely trauma-focused response indicates that thinking about trauma without processing it actually re-traumatizes. And professional care inadequacy, even professional support, sometimes fails, suggesting that many trauma-informed practitioners may not understand the specific needs of open-hearted professionals working in toxic systems. But there were effective trauma strategies. In response to how have you tried in managing trauma that's resulted in some effectiveness, social and relational support was the top effective trauma strategy, followed by professional therapeutic support. They were almost equivalent, followed by physical activity and movement, then setting boundaries, making work-life changes. Again, nature becomes significant, and mindfulness, cognitive and reflective strategies, creative expression and artistic outlets, and somatic and body-based therapies. So the tier here, interestingly, for trauma, effective trauma strategies, is social support and professional therapeutic support. The second tier becomes physical movement, boundary setting, and lifestyle changes. And the third tier involves nature engagement, mindfulness, cognitive strategies, and creative expression. So, moving now on from trauma and stress to actually looking at how are we doing well, what are the skills you have as open-hearted professionals. I asked, as an open-hearted professional, what top 3 skills would you say you are most proficient in today? And I added, please note that while there is evidence to suggest that empathy and resilience can be considered traits, there is also scholarly evidence that aspects of empathy and resilience can be developed as skills. And this came out of conversations with the focus groups to draw attention to that possibility. So these are the skills, and people are asked to choose the top 3 skills, their current skills, future skills, and skills that they might seek training in. I'm going to share with you now the 8 skills that they could choose from for their top 3. So the top skill was compassionate, also the first one I listed was compassionate leadership. I defined as building strong relationships, fostering a sense of belonging, and empowering individuals. Empathy as the ability to sense other people's emotion and ability to imagine what another person may be thinking or feeling. Ethical decision making, which I defined as evaluating choices and taking action based on moral principles, values, and professional and societal standards. Influence, the ability to affect others' thoughts, behaviours or decisions. Relational boundaries, the limits and rules set by individuals to enable mental health in relationships. Relationship building, the interpersonal abilities to foster positive and strong connections with others, both personally and professionally. Resilience, defined as the ability to effectively negotiate, adapt to, or manage significant sources of stress or trauma. And finally, self-care, the capacity to preserve and foster one's physical, emotional, mental, and social health. So those were listed in alphabetical order, and then people could select their top 3 for each question. So for their current skills, they identified as having their top 3. Empathy was the top one at 64%, followed by compassionate leadership, relationship building, then ethical decision making, then resilience, self-care, influence, relational boundaries, and people could nominate other if they wanted to instead of one of these as one of their top 3. So we found that the skills that these 260 professionals have is they're high in empathy, 64% of them are, compassionate leadership, 51%, and relationship building, 48.8%. However, we noticed that they were, in terms of what they identified as current skills that they had confidence in, they were low on relational boundaries, on their capacity to influence others, and self-care. One performance psychologist shared, "I'm helping my clients and students to get better at self-regulation, but often feel that it is the system and the circumstances, working conditions, cultural norms, that would need to change to really make their lives better." So the strengths are real, but perhaps incomplete. So moving from the skills you have, I then want to look at the challenges that you're facing. My question was in the survey, what are the immediate challenges of your profession that need to be identified and constructively addressed? So here I'm inviting participants or respondents to identify their professional sector. What are the challenges of that sector, not what are their challenges personally as a professional? I also asked that question, we'll come to that shortly, but these are the challenges for the professions. Top one being resource constraints and funding issues, what's perceived as misaligned values and industry culture, a lack of recognition and respect for the profession, poor leadership and administrative burden, gaps in training for sustainable work practice, political and societal pressures, mental health and well-being, technological and adaptation challenges. And I should mention, as we'll be looking at a few of these top themes came out of the initial survey in terms of qualitative descriptors of what they found as challenges, and these were affirmed and reinforced during the focus group conversations. So in summary, challenges being faced by the sector, resource constraints. It seems that it was about sectors that chronically undervalue the work that these open-hearted professionals do. And misaligned values in industry culture, I felt exposes a profound disconnection between why people enter these professions and how these sectors actually operate. There also seemed to be a lack of recognition and respect for the profession, that society doesn't fully appreciate what these open-hearted professionals contribute, and even that their own sectors don't adequately advocate for their value. So the demands are ever increasing, and yet the resources are scarce for the sectors. And then moving from what the profession faces as a challenge, but what you as a professional may be owning as a challenge. I asked, what challenges are you currently facing as an open-hearted professional in the work you do? And perhaps not surprising, if it's a struggle for the profession, it's a struggle for you personally as a professional, access to resources, be it time, money, people, and the constraints on those resources. Interestingly, followed by workload and time pressures, but thirdly, systemic and cultural barriers to change, followed by institutional and leadership issues, then well-being and work-life integration, career sustainability and opportunities, confidence and professional identity for you as a challenge, communication and relationship difficulties. And there were a few other responses as well. So what you're owning, the top challenges would appear to be resource constraints combined with workload pressures that paint a picture of you as an open-hearted professional being stretched beyond capacity. One physiotherapist shared, workplaces seem to place more and more demands on staff, often outside their core work, that creates greatly extended work hours. And the next tier of challenges, systemic barriers, 39%, 0.2%, and institutional leadership issues, 38%, indicates these professionals are swimming against institutional or even societal currents. These open-hearted professionals are trying to embody open-hearted values within systems that may actively resist or undermine such approaches. So now let's look at the obstacles you encounter. And this came out of a question I asked, where are you most stuck? That might seem a bit obscure, and indeed one or two people said, what do you mean by stuck, in their responses to the survey. But majority of people seem to know what stuckness meant for them, the obstacles. So the top one was structural and institutional barriers, followed by overwhelm and exhaustion, followed by, and this kind of echoes to the previous collection of data, a lack of advocacy for systemic change and a lack of professional recognition and opportunities, leading to then ineffective marketing and ineffective self-promotion, ineffective time management, inadequate work-life integration, self-doubt, and lack of confidence. So societal and institutional barriers, 44.2%, are suggesting that open-hearted professionals feel generally trapped within systems they cannot change, this stuckness around that. And overwhelming exhaustion, 33%, the point where resource constraints and workload pressures have crossed from manageable stress into potentially debilitating burnout. And these professionals have moved from struggling with to actually becoming stuck in their circumstances. And then there's a lack of advocacy for systemic change. The fact that this ranks third, I feel, reveals that open-hearted professionals see the problems but are powerless to address them systemically. So not being able to survive hierarchical structures could be an evidence here with these obstacles. So let's look a little more hopeful and positively now towards long-term aspirations. I asked, well, what are the big aspirations you have for yourself as a professional? And this long-term aspirational data, I feel, reveals a remarkable return to purpose. It invites open-hearted professionals to look beyond their current struggles, which we have done, toward a vision of sustainable impact that honours both their values and their hard-won wisdom. So here's the results of the top 3 long-term aspirations of open-hearted professionals. And you'll see we're back to making a meaningful impact. 65% made that their top long-term aspiration. Followed now, thinking long-term, by knowledge sharing and legacy. Then creative and intellectual expression, personal fulfillment and empowerment, professional leadership and influence, financial stability and independence, work-life integration and well-being, career achievement and recognition. So making a meaningful impact dominates at 65.3%. That's even higher than their original motivation of nurturing others' growth, which was 53.8%. as to what matters most for them. And this suggests that despite systemic challenges and current obstacles or stuckness, these professionals haven't abandoned their core calling. One physiotherapist said, "To share what I have learned in my profession in the hope it may help others to build on and improve before I wind back my own work." There's also so this is that knowledge sharing and educational legacy, which ranks second, representing a sophisticated evolution for these professionals. Rather than just doing the work, they want to multiply their impact by teaching others. And creative and intellectual expression, which was 36.1%, ranking third, is particularly striking given that fostering creativity innovation was their lowest initial motivation as to what matters most. So it's actually moved up as a long-term aspiration. And this suggests that their struggles have awakened a recognition that creativity isn't just a nice to have, it's actually essential for breaking through the systemic barriers that they've encountered. Personal fulfillment at 27% and work-life integration and well-being at 21% appear in their long-term vision, but only at moderate levels, suggesting that they've learned that self-care isn't the end goal, but indeed the foundation for sustainable impact. I was interested, given these aspirations and given the obstacles, if there were things that cause these open-hearted professionals to be a bit cautious about being themselves and leaning into their strengths. I asked, when it comes to fully delivering your expertise, what circumstances or contexts have you found yourself being more cautious or guarded? And the top response as a place for workplace caution was navigating the power dynamics in that workplace, followed by institutional and systemic challenges. Interestingly, then followed by professional self-doubt and insecurity, then cultural and contextual sensitivities, political and ideological tension, professional recognition and remuneration, and lack of safe work practices and boundaries. So open-hearted professionals must constantly calibrate their authenticity against potential attack, a kind of occupational hazard of caring or creating in hostile environments. So power dynamics at 53% exposes a fundamental tension. Open-heartedness often challenges traditional authority structures through its emphasis on collaboration, empathy, and shared humanity. And institutional and systemic challenges, 55.4%, confirms that entire organizational cultures can be antithetical to open-hearted approaches. Professional self-doubt and insecurity is not because they lack competence, but because their value-based approach is constantly being questioned or undermined. So if that's what is the conditions for caution, what would be the conditions for boldness? When it comes to fully delivering your expertise, what circumstances or contexts enable you to be more bold and adventurous? The number one condition for boldness is having trust and support, 65%. Followed by community and collaborative relationships, personal competence and preparation, professional autonomy and agency, positive feedback, clear purpose and impact, resource adequacy, and psychological safety. So trust and support, 65%. When they know others have their back, they can extend themselves without fear of professional or personal attack. Community and collaboration at 46.1%. They don't just work better with others, they need others to access their own full potential. And this suggests that their boldness isn't individualistic, but emerges from collective safety and shared purpose. And personal competence and preparation at 43.8%. This boldness is grounded in expertise and careful preparation. They've learned that good intentions aren't enough. They need skills and knowledge to safely push boundaries. So your boldness actually emerges from supportive ecosystems. And then we have this interesting gender concentration. Many of the sectors that were represented in this study demonstrated high gender bias concentration, with some notable exceptions. Of those who responded to the gender identification question, coaches had 100% female representation. Higher education, inclusive of both academics and administrators, had between 84 to 100% female representation. Healthcare had between 67 to 100% female representation, except for paramedics, which was, of those who identified in that role, 80% male. The more equivalent populations of females and males were in religious leadership or pastoral care. So it had 56% male participants in the survey, 41% female, and social workers, 40% male, 60% female. One respondent's powerful reflection about women internalizing blame for workplace dysfunction, I think, adds a crucial context to all of this. And she writes or expresses, honestly, I think we can put the burden of stress management onto the sufferer when it is the workplace that needs to change. No amount of yoga, exercise, counseling, self-care, or family friends could help me with an unsustainable workload, 5 years of insomnia, and sexist bosses. HR did not have any real interest in fixing the workplace, because that's also their employer. And that very strong statement, which I appreciate, came from an academic stroke coach stroke actor. So these professionals have identified that socialized caring patterns can become self-destructive in professional contexts. Okay, moving towards the end now, watching the time, and I think I'm going to get there in the next 10 to 15 minutes, this summary. I'm now looking at the confident intention. So this is now a question of what are your top 3 current intentions. So we're looking at aspirations, which are long-term. These are much more short-term. This is looking over the next 12 to 18 months. And in fact, with this, we had work-life balance and well-being as a top 3 intention over the next 12 to 18 months, followed by creative, social, or health projects, knowledge sharing, then financial stability, growth over the next 12 to 18 months, career advancement, professional identity and purpose, professional community building, leadership transition, and legacy. And this time I wanted to kind of capture it as kind of 5 steps in professional development in the next 12 to 18 months. So we've got that foundation of work-life balance and well-being, and once we've got that, we're enabled to pursue creative, social, or health projects, which may hopefully provide some more financial stability, demonstrating a sense of career advancement and affirming our professional identity. So this data reveals a profound pivot towards self-preservation and renewal. It's a striking contrast to the service-oriented motivations and the system track stuckness that I shared with you in the earlier questions. So the top intention, work-life balance and well-being, 43.8%, represents a dramatic shift from the earlier data where nurturing others, 53.8%, was the primary motivation. Creative, social, health projects ranking second at 41.5%, I think indicates these professionals are actively seeking to replenish what their work environments have otherwise drained. Then there's the clustering of financial stability at 29.6%, career advancement at 28.8%, and professional identity work at 28%, which I feel suggests a calculated effort to build personal sustainability. Indeed, after feeling trapped by systems, I see that they're working to create more agency and options for themselves. One person noted the gift of time to invest in mentoring and coaching without feeling pressured. That came from a lecturer research coordinator. So this isn't simply career advancement. I've defined this as soul restoration. And indeed, these people are investing in skills. I asked, as an open-hearted professional, what 3 skills would you be willing to invest time and or money to improve or master? And I did note again, please note that while there's evidence to suggest that empathy and resilience can be considered traits, there's also scholarly evidence that these aspects of empathy and resilience can be developed as skills. So here we are looking at investing in the skills they perceive are going to be needed. So compassionate leadership at 51.5% suggests that they want to amplify what has already been a natural strength. What's interesting in this investment in further training is self-care is now the second one, 45.4%. They're wanting to protect their capacity to continue to do this compassionate leadership. And the third one is influence at 42.7%, which I'm interpreting as gaining the power to create systemic change in the future. So this represents a mature investment strategy, enhancing what you're already good at, protecting what makes you effective, and developing what you need to create change. Comparing their current strengths to investment priorities, I think also reveals some sophisticated thinking. So if we're thinking about investing in skills needed, you'll see we've got boxes, we've got low skill, low investment, where we've got nothing interesting happening there. But with low skill, so the lower part of the 4 quadrants, and to your right, a high investment, low current skill plus high investment priority allows for some gap filling. We're able to fill in where there's been a gap in self-care with a move from 22.7% to 45.4%, influence from 15.8 to 42.7, and boundaries from 10.8 to 30.8. In the high skill and high investment priority, which equals strategic enhancement, we have compassionate leadership at 51.1%, moving to 51.5%, so it's maintaining that strength. And relationship building is currently at 48, moving down a little to 39, but still maintaining it. And then finally we have high current skill and low investment priority, sufficient mastery, where empathy, which is current, has dropped way down because we've already got that strong enough, and ethical decision making has dropped a little. We've got an adequate amount for that as well. So we now look to the future. As you look at your open-hearted professional path, what top skills will you need to be more effective? And the top 3 were influence, self-care, and resilience, and then supported by compassionate leadership, relationship building, and boundaries, and so on. But this is what I see is an evolution. That the current strengths are now looking to future priorities, and I found this across all the professional sectors. So we have a move from empathy, dropping it down because we've got that. So we don't need to keep on working to enhance it. Ethical decision making similarly drops down, but influence moves up, self-care moves up, and having healthy boundaries moves up in the future. So already we're seeing open-hearted professionals evolving from reactive care to strategic influence. And I've captured this in what I call the 3 future skill priorities of the report. In the political sphere, I see that as empowerment, and we have influence at 46.9%, creating change rather than just adapting to inequitable systems. Then we have the protective sphere, where I identify this with embodiment or self-care, which can also include boundaries. So you've got 46.5%, but we could also include notions of boundaries here, thus safeguarding capacity for transforming lives and communities. And the third sphere of the future priorities, I think, for open-hearted professionals is the performative sphere, whether that's creatively performing or service performance in terms of endurance and resilience, thus ensuring sustainability for long-term impact. So here's a diagram of how these three spheres may intersect. And now I'll present my take, my integrating the significance of the heart, open-heartedness. I'm going to propose now three strategies from nature's wisdom in which I believe we can learn some profound things from the heart, as the heart shows us how to be sustainably open. These are three integrated strategies from biology: embodiment, empowerment, and endurance. Where embodiment, you may recall the four chambers, allows the complete cycle to receive, to process, to give, and to rest. And this is captured in the future skill need data, where boundaries rise from 10.8% to a 36.5% priority. So it's about taking in, processing, and expressing with wisdom. That's embodiment. Empowerment, I align or see, is related to the electrical system of the heart, which is that self-generating, self-regulating rhythm, which in the future skill need data, we see influence has risen from 15.8% to 46.9% as a priority, in which your intrinsic power source needs no permission, just like the electrical system in our hearts that don't have to be driven by the brain. So I believe we can enhance our intrinsic power source to be empowered. And then the third is endurance, represented by the functions of the valves of the heart and the cardiac muscle cells. It's a protection that enables flow rather than stopping flow. And this, for me, picks up on the future skill need data of resilience as a 43.5% priority, where there's that right openness at the right time. So this integration, I see, is like the heart. All three priorities work together, because if we have empowerment without embodiment, we are ungrounded. If we have embodiment without endurance, we experience overwhelm. And if we have endurance without empowerment, then it's mere survival. And I've captured this again using this diagram of embodiment, empowerment, endurance, functioning, operating like the heart. So, in summary, what are the next steps? Well, I found from the process of doing the 13 focus groups, something really important emerged, what I felt to be a community of practice. Indeed, what participants experienced in the research focus groups. One said, what I really appreciate is I feel less alone, having seen similar concerns expressed here, like the results that we were looking at, really relating to much of it. So I really appreciate that. And I think other people will benefit from saying a lot of these concerns are very common. And there's a feeling of almost togetherness, and that where a lot of others are going through the same thing. Another said, I resonated with a lot of the things that people said, and every now and then I feel isolated and like I don't feel like other people feel this way. And so having this spelled out and articulated so clearly across the world just makes me feel very excited and like I'm not alone. And finally, it was really such an enlightening process, and I really hope we'll be able to connect with each other, because I feel very connected to all of you after the survey, and just wanted to say that there was such a value in being called an open-hearted professional. So this has inspired me, and what I'm beginning to envisage now is providing a community, an online community, which I'm calling an oasis for empowering change. And I see that oasis for empowering change being at the heart of embodiment, empowerment, and endurance. So the vision I'm inviting you to be a part of, and you can let me know by email if you'd like to, it's a vision I have to create comprehensive cross-sector mentorship networks, leveraging each sector's unique strengths, to develop influence and advocacy training, addressing that power gap that I've described across all open-hearted professions, to establish integrated resilience and sustainability practices across the various professional ecosystems that I've encountered, to build collective recognition campaigns for societal value of all open-hearted professional work, and to create cross-sector learning exchanges where each profession teaches their own unique excellence to others. So it will be, in essence, a cross-sector community of practice with monthly online gatherings where we'll explore various strategies for change, as well as having peer membership and support across what I'm calling within this group the 4 seasons of change. And that will become a founding member group of $50 per month Australian, with opportunity for those founding members to contribute what you feel will add value to our gathering together as a refuge and a support for empowering change in the longer term. The other thing I'm bringing, emerging out of this whole study, is an ecosystem which I call the Empowering Vulnerability Ecosystem, or EVE, which interestingly the Hebrew word Eve means life. And so that will consist of a process, an ecosystem of renewal, of agility, and practice. Renewal, which integrates embodiment and endurance, agility that integrates embodiment and empowerment, and practice that integrates endurance and empowerment. And that whole holistic development program of renewal, agility, and practice will be supported at the heart by the Oasis for Empowering Change. So we return to that sustainable rhythm. Again, remember feeling your own heartbeat and feeling that rhythm that has sustained humans for millennia, and that the heart, thank goodness, knows how to be open and protected. So my invitation for the Oasis for Empowering Change, if you'd like to invest in your own empowering change as a founding member of the Oasis for Empowering Change, please feel most welcome to contact me. You'll have the email there on the screen. I'll also be sharing it tonight at this launch with people if they'd like to contact me to find out more about that. And I plan to launch this membership in October. And then the Empowering Vulnerability Ecosystem, which is designed for those ready for a much deeper transformation through renewal, agility, and practice. And if you'd like to explore that program with me further, again, feel welcome to contact me at mark@senseconnection.com. So a final thought. Your open heart is not a liability to have to manage. It's a sophisticated system designed for sustainable surface and creativity. And I'm here to help you honor its wisdom. So here are my references for this report. And with that, I declare this report launched. Hooray!